I grew up in a small town in Montana, and when I was in my late teens, I took a job as a night porter at a cluster of cabins in the mountains. The title sounded fancier than it was. Really, I was just the night watchman. I answered the phone if anyone called, kept an eye on the property, and checked in the occasional guest who arrived late. The office wasn't much, just a small lobby, a desk, and wide glass windows that looked out into the woods. To keep us from falling asleep during those long shifts, the owners had installed a VHS player in the office. That quickly became my nightly ritual. Before heading to work, I'd rent a movie, pop it in, and watch until the sun came up. For a while, it was the perfect system. But one night, that simple habit nearly got me killed. It was around 1 a.m. I was halfway through Hellraiser, a choice that already had me feeling jumpy, when I heard something outside. Movement. The sound was faint at first, muffled by the thick mountain air. The office had big glass panel windows and a door with glass too, so I could see out into the night. But when I glanced up, there was nothing. Just darkness pressing against the glass.
I didn't think much of it. Guests sometimes wandered around late at night to stargaze. I turned back to the TV and tried to ignore the way the shadows in the corners seemed to shift with every flicker of light from the movie. But then I heard it again. Louder this time. Closer. I muted the TV and sat still, straining to listen. At first I thought it might be footsteps, but no. This wasn't the sound of someone walking upright. It was slower, lower, like something dragging itself forward on all fours. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Out here, that sound could only mean trouble. A bear, maybe a mountain lion. Predators that had no problem taking down a lone teenager in a dark office. We kept a loaded gun in the safe for exactly that kind of scenario. My heart hammered as I rushed to grab it, the weight of the metal suddenly feeling like the only thing keeping me alive. Gun in hand, I crept into the lobby. The place felt impossibly small, all glass and silence. I stood at the window, peering out, flashlight ready. My breath fogged up the glass. The woods were motionless, no glowing eyes reflecting the beam of my light, no rustle of branches, nothing. And then all at once, a figure rose up from the ground directly outside the window. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. It wasn't an animal, it was a man. His mouth and chin were smeared with what looked like blood, his shirt stained with a reddish-brown slime that dripped down his chest. He staggered forward, pressing one hand against the glass. A streak of that same slime smeared across the window as he tried to steady himself. Then with a low groan, he collapsed back to the ground. For a second, I froze. My brain screamed at me to run, to lock the doors, to hide. But the part of me that knew I was the only staff member on duty forced me to move. He wasn't attacking me. He was hurt.
A cold wave of dread hit me. If it was food poisoning, or worse, some contagious illness, I might already have been exposed just by stepping inside. I forced myself to back out of the cabin without touching anyone, then sprinted back to the office phone. My words tumbled over themselves as I told the dispatcher what I'd seen. Minutes later, the sound of sirens shattered the silence of the mountains. Ambulances tore up the gravel path, red and blue lights flashing through the trees. Not one ambulance, 4. Paramedics rushed into cabin 9, stepping carefully around the vomit as they worked to stabilize each victim. One by one, stretchers rolled out. Guests gathered in the dark, whispering nervously, drawn by the chaos. My boss showed up, face pale and tight. He stepped into the cabin, then quickly backed out again, shaking his head. "It smells like blood," he muttered, "but it's not just blood." I didn't argue. I didn't want to go back in there. When the paramedics were gone and the ambulances disappeared down the road, the cops started piecing things together, and what they found made my blood run cold. The group in cabin 9 hadn't just been random guests, they were old friends. The trip had been organized by a woman from Washington, a kind of reunion. She had picked our cabins for the gathering, and they'd all arrived cheerful, bringing food, wine, and gifts. But once the meal was served, everything changed. The woman who organized the trip had poisoned the food. Weed killer, rat poison, enough to kill all of them. After they ate, she cut the phone line to the cabin. Then she packed her bags, got in her car, and drove all the way back to Washington, leaving her so-called friends to choke, vomit, and die alone in the mountains. If the man hadn't stumbled to the office, if I hadn't called 911 when I did, none of them would have survived.
The ambulances carried the victims away, sirens wailing as they disappeared into the night. Guests whispered among themselves, horrified. My boss stood silently beside me, both of us staring at the dark, empty cabin that had turned into a house of death. The police never figured out why she did it. Revenge? Jealousy? Some secret feud buried under years of friendship? Nobody knew. What they did know was this: cabin number 9 had become a trap, and I had walked straight into it. Sometimes I think about that night, how close it all came to ending differently. If I hadn't been awake, sitting in front of that VHS tape, I might have been the only one left alive to tell the story. And to this day, whenever I hear something moving outside at night, I can't help but look over my shoulder. Because sometimes, what's crawling toward your window isn't an animal at all. And sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't hiding in the woods. They're sitting across the table, smiling as they pass you a plate of food.